You think you failed. That's the story you've been telling yourself, isn't it? That you tried and it didn't work. That you gave your time, your energy, your effort, and somehow it still wasn't enough. So now you sit there in silence, carrying a weight you never say out loud, but you feel it every single day. Failure. But what if that story is wrong? What if everything you believe about your failure is built on a misunderstanding? Because here's the truth most people will never tell you directly. You didn't fail, you stopped. And that difference changes everything. Failure is not when results don't show up. It's not when progress feels slow. It's not when things get hard, confusing, or uncertain. Failure is when you decide to walk away. So ask yourself honestly, no excuses, no comfort, just truth. How many times have you done exactly that? That goal you once chased with fire in your chest, you didn't fail. You just left when it stopped feeling exciting. That skill you promised would change your life. You didn't fail. You just stopped when it became repetitive. That version of yourself you imagined, stronger, sharper, more disciplined, you didn't fail to become that person. You just gave up before you had time to grow into them. And it's not because you're weak. It's not because you lack talent. It's not because success isn't meant for you. It's because you quit. At the exact moment, things stopped being easy. And that moment, that's where almost everyone disappears. That's where dreams don't die because they're impossible, but because the person chasing them couldn't last just a little bit longer. Because the truth is, the distance between where you are now and where you want to be is not measured in talent, intelligence, or luck. It's measured in how long you're willing to continue after you stop seeing results. And that's the part no one prepares you for. The silence, the emptiness, the days where you keep showing up and nothing seems to change. No progress, no recognition, no proof that you're getting closer, just effort disappearing into nothing. And that's exactly where most people give up. Not at the beginning, because the beginning is exciting, not at the end, because the end is rewarding, but in the middle, that long, invisible, exhausting middle, where everything feels pointless, where your mind starts whispering, maybe this isn't for you, maybe you're wasting your time, maybe you should stop. And slowly, you listen, you hesitate, you slow down, and then one day, without even realizing it, you quit. And later, when you look back, you call it failure. But it wasn't failure. It was a decision, a quiet one, a small one, but powerful enough to change your entire life. Because success doesn't require perfection. It doesn't require constant motivation. It doesn't require you to have everything figured out. It requires one thing, that you don't stop. And that's what most people underestimate. They think success is about something big, something dramatic, something extraordinary. But most of the time, success is just doing the same thing, again and again and again, long after it stops being exciting. It's waking up when you don't feel like it. It's continuing when you're tired. It's showing up when no one is watching. It's moving forward when everything inside you is telling you to quit. And here's the truth that might change everything. You are not behind. You are not incapable. You are not a failure. You are someone who stopped too early. And that means something powerful. It means your story isn't over. It means your potential is still there. It means everything you think you lost was never gone. It was just waiting on the other side of the moment you chose to quit. So don't ask yourself why you failed. Ask yourself this instead. How many times did you walk away right before things could finally work? Because if you answer that honestly, you'll realize something most people never do. You were never far from success. You were just one decision away, one more attempt, one more day, one more time pushing forward when it would have been easier to stop. That's the only difference. One person keeps going, the other doesn't. So before you ever call yourself a failure again, ask yourself one final question. Did you truly fail? Or did you just give up before the result had time to appear? Because those two things are not the same, and confusing them might be the reason you've been stuck this entire time. You think failure is when you don't get results. That's what you've been taught, isn't it? No outcome, no achievement, no visible progress. That must mean you failed. But that belief, that simple automatic conclusion, is exactly what's been holding you back this entire time. Because the truth is, you've been defining failure the wrong way. And that mistake? It's dangerous. It's the reason people stop too early. It's the reason potential gets wasted. It's the reason so many lives never become what they could have been. Because when you believe that no result means failure, you start judging yourself too soon. You start measuring your worth based on outcomes that haven't even had time to appear yet. You start looking at effort and calling it meaningless just because it hasn't paid off yet. But think about it carefully. Since when did progress become something that must be immediate? Since when did growth become something that has to be visible right away? And since when did effort become worthless just because it hasn't turned into success fast enough? It didn't. You just started believing it did, because the world around you made it look that way. You see people winning, but not the years they struggled. You see results, but not the invisible work behind them. You see the outcome, but not the process that made it possible. So your mind creates a shortcut. If I don't see results, I must be failing. And that's where everything starts to break. Because real progress doesn't look like progress, at least not in the beginning. In the beginning, it looks like repetition. It looks like confusion. It looks like doing the same thing over and over again with no guarantee that it will work. It looks slow. It looks uncertain. It looks like nothing is happening. And that's exactly why most people quit. Not because they're incapable, not because they lack talent, but because they misinterpret the process. They think the silence means they're losing. They think the lack of results means they're not good enough. They think the struggle is a sign to stop. But what if it's the opposite? What if the silence is where growth is happening? What if the lack of visible results is just the phase where everything is being built beneath the surface? Because that's how it works. Every skill, every success, every transformation, it starts invisibly. Before anything shows on the outside, something is changing on the inside. Your mind is adapting, your habits are shifting, your capacity is growing, but you don't see it. So you assume it's not there. And that assumption becomes your biggest mistake. Because the moment you believe that nothing is happening, you stop, you slow down, you lose intensity, and eventually you walk away. Not because you failed, but because you thought you did. And that's the trap. You don't lose because you can't succeed. You lose because you misread the moment. You look at a temporary lack of results and you treat it like a permanent verdict. You take something incomplete and you label it as finished. You call the process a failure before it even had the chance to become a success. And once you do that, everything changes. Your energy drops, your belief weakens, your actions become inconsistent. And then slowly, you create the very failure you were trying to avoid. Not because you couldn't do it, but because you stopped doing it. That's the reality most people never face. Failure is not what happens when you don't get results. Failure is what happens when you stop trying to get them. Because as long as you're still moving, as long as you're still learning, as long as you're still showing up, you are not failing. You are in progress, even if it feels slow, even if it feels frustrating, even if it feels like nothing is changing. Because progress is not always visible, growth is not always obvious, and success is not always immediate. But quitting? Quitting is final. Quitting is the only moment where possibility disappears. Quitting is the only point where growth stops completely. And that's why it is the real definition of failure. Not the absence of results, not the presence of struggle, not the feeling of uncertainty, but the decision to stop. Let that sink in. You are not a failure because you haven't achieved something yet. You are not behind because it's taking longer than you expected. You are not incapable because the results haven't shown up. You are simply in the phase where results are still being built. And if you can understand that, if you can truly accept that, you change everything. Because now, instead of panicking when you don't see results, you keep going. Instead of doubting yourself when things feel slow, you stay consistent. Instead of quitting when it gets hard, you push forward. And that shift, that one shift in perspective, is what separates the people who eventually succeed from the ones who never do. Because the ones who succeed are not the ones who never struggle. They're not the ones who never doubt. They're not the ones who always feel motivated. They are simply the ones who don't confuse no results yet with failure. They understand something deeper, something most people ignore, that success is delayed, that growth is invisible, that results come last, And because of that, they don't stop. They don't walk away in the middle. They don't quit when things feel uncertain. They keep going long enough for the process to finally reveal itself. And when it does, it looks like success. But what you don't see is how many times they could have quit before that moment. How many times they saw nothing and chose to continue anyway. How many times they felt like giving up and didn't. That's the difference. Not talent, not luck, not intelligence. Just one simple truth. They didn't stop. So before you ever tell yourself that you failed, remember this. You don't fail when you haven't achieved something. You fail when you stop trying to achieve it. And if you're still here, still moving, still pushing forward, then you are not a failure. You are simply not finished yet. You want it fast. That's the truth most people won't admit out loud. You don't just want success, you want it now. You want results you can see, proof you can feel, something real enough to silence the doubt in your head. And when it doesn't come quickly, you start questioning everything, your effort, your direction, your ability. You start thinking, maybe this isn't working. Maybe I'm doing it wrong. Maybe I'm just not good enough. But what you don't realize is this. You're not failing. You're being deceived. Because the world you're looking at is not real. It's filtered, compressed, edited into something that looks instant. You scroll through your screen and see people winning. Someone builds a business. Someone transforms their body. Someone masters a skill. And it all looks fast, too fast. Like it happened overnight, like one decision, one moment, one lucky break, and suddenly everything changed. But what you don't see is the time. You don't see the months where nothing happened, the years where nobody noticed, the long stretches of effort that looked exactly like failure. You only see the result, and your mind fills in the gap with a lie. If it didn't happen fast for me, then I must be behind. That's the illusion. And it's one of the most dangerous beliefs you can carry. Because once you accept that success should be quick, you lose your patience. And once you lose your patience, you lose your consistency. And once you lose your consistency, you lose everything. Not because you couldn't succeed, but because you didn't give it enough time. Let's be clear about something most people avoid. Nothing meaningful happens instantly. Not real skill, not real growth, not real success. Everything that lasts, everything that matters, is built slowly, layer by layer, day by day, repetition after repetition. But that kind of progress, it doesn't feel exciting. It doesn't feel rewarding. And most importantly, it doesn't look like progress at all. It looks like doing the same thing again with no visible change. It looks like effort with no feedback. It looks like showing up and getting nothing in return. And that's where the illusion destroys you. Because you've been trained to expect results quickly. When they don't come, you assume something is wrong. But nothing is wrong. You're just in the phase where results haven't caught up yet. Because progress doesn't always move at the same speed as your effort. Sometimes you're building something beneath the surface, something invisible, something that takes time before it reveals itself. Think about it. A skill doesn't appear the first time you practice it. A strong body doesn't form after one workout. A disciplined mind doesn't exist after one good day. Everything requires accumulation. Small actions, repeated enough times until they become something bigger. But accumulation is slow. And because it's slow, it's easy to underestimate. It's easy to doubt. It's easy to walk away from. And that's exactly what most people do. They start, they try, they commit for a moment. But when the results don't match their expectations, they stop. Not because they can't do it, but because it's taking longer than they thought. And that's the real problem. Not lack of ability, not lack of opportunity, but lack of patience. Because you've been conditioned to believe that if something is working, it should show up quickly. But that's not how reality works. Reality is quiet. It doesn't reward you immediately. It doesn't give you constant feedback. It doesn't reassure you that you're on the right path. Most of the time, it gives you nothing, just silence. And in that silence, you have two choices. You either trust the process or you abandon it. And most people abandon it because they confuse silence with failure. They confuse delay with denial. They confuse not yet with never. But those are not the same thing, not even close. Just because you don't see results doesn't mean nothing is happening. Just because you don't feel progress doesn't mean you're not improving. Just because it's taking time doesn't mean it's not working. It just means you're early. You're still in the phase where the effort hasn't revealed its reward yet. And if you quit in that phase, you never get to see what it becomes. That's why so many people stay stuck. Not because they're incapable, but because they expect things to happen faster than they should. They measure their progress too soon. They judge their results too early. And they walk away before anything has the chance to grow. But the people who eventually succeed, they understand something different. They don't expect speed. They expect time. They don't chase instant results. They commit to long-term consistency. They don't panic when nothing happens. They continue anyway. Because they know something most people ignore, that progress is delayed, that growth is silent, that results come last, and because of that, they don't stop. They keep showing up. They keep repeating. They keep building, even when there's nothing to show for it. And eventually, something changes. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but gradually. The skill becomes natural. The effort becomes easier. The results begin to appear. And from the outside, it looks fast. It looks like it just happened. It looks like an overnight success. But it wasn't. It was time. It was patience. It was consistency, long enough to let the process work. And that's what you need to understand. You're not behind. You're not failing. You're not wasting your time. You're just expecting results on a timeline that doesn't exist. Because real progress doesn't follow your expectations. It follows its own pace. And your job is not to control the speed. Your job is to stay long enough for the results to finally catch up. So stop measuring your growth every day. Stop expecting proof too early. Stop thinking that no results means no progress, because that belief will make you quit right before things start to work. And remember this, just because you don't see results doesn't mean you're not improving. It just means you haven't reached the moment where your effort becomes visible. And if you can stay long enough to reach that moment, everything changes. But only if you don't stop. This is the moment nobody prepares you for. Not the beginning, because the beginning is easy. Not the end, because the end is worth it. But this part, this quiet, heavy, exhausting point, where everything inside you starts breaking, this is where most people disappear. Not because they failed, not because they couldn't make it, but because they couldn't handle this moment. The moment where you're tired, where your energy is gone, where your mind is louder than your ambition. You've been pushing for so long, showing up, repeating the work, trying to stay consistent, and yet nothing seems to change. No clear progress, no visible reward, no sign that you're getting closer. Just effort and silence. And that silence becomes dangerous, because that's when the questions begin. Is this even working? Am I wasting my time? What if I'm not meant for this? At first, they're just thoughts, but slowly they become beliefs. And once they become beliefs, everything starts to collapse. Your confidence weakens, your focus drifts, your discipline breaks, and suddenly, something that once felt possible starts to feel impossible. That's the moment, the most dangerous moment, because it doesn't feel like failure. It feels like logic. It feels reasonable to stop. It feels smart to walk away. After all, you've tried, you've put in effort, you've waited, and nothing happened. So quitting doesn't feel like giving up. It feels like making a decision, a rational one, a necessary one. But that's the illusion, because what you're feeling right now is not the truth. It's the result of fatigue, of repetition without reward, of pushing forward without feedback. Your mind is not trying to guide you. It's trying to protect you. It wants relief. It wants comfort. It wants to escape the discomfort of uncertainty. So it tells you to stop. Not because stopping is right, but because stopping is easier. And that's why so many people quit here, because they mistake exhaustion for clarity. They think the feeling of wanting to quit means they should quit. But what if that feeling is actually a sign of something else? What if the moment you want to give up the most is not a warning, but an indicator? Because think about it. Why would it feel this hard if you weren't pushing your limits? Why would your mind resist so strongly? If you weren't getting closer to something meaningful, why would the pressure build if nothing was about to change? Because that's how growth works. It doesn't feel comfortable at the edge. It feels intense. It feels uncertain. It feels like everything is telling you to stop. But that edge, that exact point where you feel like you can't continue, is often where everything shifts. Not before. Not at the start, but right there, right when it feels the hardest, right when it feels the most pointless, right when quitting feels like the only option. Because that's where most people stop. And if most people stop there, then everything beyond that point belongs to the few who don't. That's the difference. It's not talent. It's not luck. It's not some hidden advantage. It's the ability to endure that one moment a little longer, to take one more step when everything inside you is telling you not to continue without certainty, without proof, without immediate reward. That's what separates outcomes, because success is not a straight path. It's a breaking point, a test, a moment where everything tries to push you out. And if you leave, you never know how close you were. That's the hardest truth to accept. Most people who quit don't quit because they're far away. They quit because they're tired, because they're unsure, because they can't see the result yet. But what they don't realize is this: they're often closer than they think. Much closer. Close enough that one more day, one more attempt, one more push could have changed everything. But they don't take it. Because in that moment, their emotions feel more real than their potential. Their doubt feels stronger than their purpose. Their exhaustion feels more convincing than their goal. So they stop. And once they stop, the process stops with them. Not because it was impossible, but because it was unfinished. That's why this moment matters more than anything else. Not the start, not the plan, not the idea, but this, the moment where you feel like you can't continue. Because if you can get through this moment, if you can stay, if you can push just a little further, you move into a space most people never reach. A space where effort finally begins to show, where progress becomes visible, where things start to shift, but only if you don't leave. Only if you don't give in to the illusion. Only if you understand what's really happening. You're not breaking down, you're breaking through. You're not lost, you're at the edge of change. You're not failing, you're being tested. And the test is simple. Not easy, but simple. Can you continue when everything inside you is telling you to stop? Because if you can, even just for a little longer, you separate yourself from the majority. You step into a different outcome, a different result, a different life. And it doesn't happen instantly. It doesn't feel dramatic, but it happens, slowly, quietly, until one day, the thing you've been working for finally appears. And when it does, it will look like success. But you'll know the truth. It wasn't talent, it wasn't luck. It was that one moment where you could have quit and didn't. So when you feel it again, that weight, that doubt, that overwhelming urge to stop, remember this: that feeling is not the end. It's the threshold. And most people turn back right there. But if you don't, if you take one more step, if you hold on just a little longer, you might realize something powerful. The moment you wanted to quit the most was the moment you were closest to everything finally working. And the only question left is, will you stop or will you push through it? No one is coming, not later, not when you feel ready, not when things get harder. No one is going to step into your life and suddenly fix everything for you. And the sooner you accept that, the sooner everything starts to change. Because most people are waiting for motivation, waiting for the right moment, waiting for someone to guide them, push them, believe in them, waiting for something, anything, that makes the process easier. But life doesn't work like that. It doesn't reward waiting. It doesn't respond to potential. It doesn't care about what you could become. It only responds to one thing: what you actually do. And if you're not doing anything, nothing happens. That's the truth most people avoid. Not because they don't understand it, but because it's uncomfortable, because it removes the excuses. It removes the idea that someone else will step in. It removes the hope that things will change without you changing first. And that's why it feels harsh. Because once you accept that no one is coming, you lose the ability to blame anything outside yourself. You can't blame your situation. You can't blame your past. You can't blame the lack of support. Because none of that moves your life forward. Only your actions do. And here's where it gets even harder. No one is going to help you when you're being lazy. No one is going to show up when you keep delaying what you know you should be doing. No one is going to step in while you sit there waiting for the perfect condition. Because the world doesn't reward intention. It rewards execution. You can have the best ideas, the strongest goals, the clearest vision of what you want to become. But if your actions don't match it, none of it matters. And deep down, you already know this. You know the difference between needing rest and making excuses. You know when you're truly overwhelmed and when you're just avoiding discomfort. You know when you should be working, but you choose to scroll, delay, or distract yourself instead. And in those moments, nothing outside of you is the problem. It's your decision, your choice to act or not act. That's where everything is decided. Not in big moments, not in dramatic turning points, but in the small, quiet decisions you make every day. The ones nobody sees, the ones nobody rewards immediately. The ones that feel insignificant, but build everything. Because success is not one big action. It's repetition. It's doing the same thing again and again until it becomes something real. It's consistency. When you don't feel like being consistent. It's discipline when motivation disappears. It's action when excuses feel easier. And that's why most people don't make it. Not because they can't, but because they don't repeat the process long enough. They act once, then stop. They try for a few days, then lose focus. They start with intensity, then fade when it gets uncomfortable. And they expect results from something they didn't sustain. But that's not how it works. Nothing builds itself. Nothing grows without repetition. Nothing changes unless you keep doing the work, over and over and over again. Even when it's boring, even when it's frustrating, even when it feels like it's not working. Because that's the cost. That's the price of progress. Not talent, not luck, but consistency. And consistency is something no one can give you. No one can do it for you. No one can replace your effort. No one can show up on your behalf. You either do or it doesn't happen. That's it. There's no shortcut, no hidden path, no secret that makes it easier. Just action, repeated long enough to produce a result. And that's where the truth becomes undeniable. No one owes you success. Not the world, not your circumstances, not the people around you. No one is responsible for your outcome except you. And that's not meant to discourage you. It's meant to free you. Because once you understand that no one is coming, you stop waiting. You stop delaying. You stop hoping things will change on their own. And you start moving. You start acting. You start taking responsibility for every step forward. Because now you understand something powerful. If nothing is happening, it's because you're not doing enough yet. Not in a negative way, not in a judgmental way, but in a real, honest way. And that realization is what gives you control. Because if your actions create your results, then changing your acts changes everything. Not instantly, not dramatically, but inevitably. Because repetition always wins. Small actions done consistently always lead somewhere. But only if you keep going. Only if you don't stop when it feels slow. Only if you don't quit when it gets hard. And that brings you back to the truth most people try to avoid. You are responsible for your habits, for your discipline, for your choices, and for your future. No one else. So the next time you feel stuck, don't look around for someone to save you. Look at what you're doing. Look at what you're avoiding. Look at what you know you should be doing, but aren't, because that's where the answer is. Not outside, not somewhere else. Right there. In your actions, or your lack of them. And once you see that clearly, you stop waiting for change. You become the one who creates it. Step by step. Action by action. Day by day. Until one day, everything you've been repeating turns into something real. And when it does, it won't feel like luck. It won't feel like something you were given. It will feel like something you built. Because you did. Through every moment you chose to act, when it would have been easier not to. Through every time you repeated the work, when it felt pointless. Through every decision to stop waiting and start doing. And that's the only path that exists. No one is coming. No one is saving you, and no one owes you success. But you have something better than that. You have control over what you do next. And that's all you need. You're waiting to feel like it. That's the problem. You tell yourself you'll start when you're motivated, when the energy comes back, when you finally feel ready. But that feeling, it's unreliable. It comes and it goes. Some days you wake up driven, focused, ready to do everything. Other days you feel nothing, no energy, no desire, no reason to move. And in those moments, you stop. Not because you don't know what to do, not because you've lost your goal, but because you don't feel like doing it. And that's where most people lose. They build their actions on emotion, And emotions are unstable. They rise, they fall, they change without warning. So when you depend on motivation, your progress becomes inconsistent. You act when you feel good. You stop when you feel tired. You push when it's easy. You quit when it's hard. And that cycle keeps you exactly where you are. Because motivation is not designed to carry you. It's just a spark, a temporary push, something that gets you started but cannot keep you going. And if you rely on it for too long, you burn out the moment it disappears. That's why you've started so many times and stopped just as many. Because you were waiting for a feeling instead of building a system. Because what actually creates progress is not motivation, it's discipline. Discipline doesn't ask how you feel. It doesn't care if you're tired. It doesn't wait for the perfect mood. It simply tells you, do it anyway. Even when it's boring, even when it's repetitive, even when you'd rather do anything else. That's the difference. Motivation makes things easy. Discipline makes things happen. Motivation is emotional. Discipline is intentional. Motivation is temporary. Discipline is consistent. And consistency is the only thing that produces results. Because success is not built in moments of intensity. It's built in moments of resistance. The moments where you don't want to act, but you do it anyway. The moments where everything inside you says, not today, and you move anyway. That's where change happens. Not when it feels good, but when it feels difficult. Because that's when you're building control. Control over your habits, control over your mind, control over your actions. And that control is what separates people who move forward from those who stay stuck. Think about it. If you only act when you feel motivated, how many days do you actually move? A few, maybe a handful. And the rest, lost to hesitation, lost to distraction, lost to waiting for a feeling that may never come. But when you act out of discipline, every day becomes productive. Not perfect, not easy, but consistent. And consistency always beats intensity. A small action repeated daily is stronger than a burst of effort that disappears, because repetition builds momentum. Momentum builds progress, and progress builds results, but only if you keep going. And that's where discipline matters most. It keeps you moving when motivation is gone. It keeps you focused when distractions are everywhere. It keeps you consistent when your emotions are unstable. It becomes the structure that carries you forward. And once you have that structure, everything changes. You stop negotiating with yourself. You stop asking, do I feel like it? You stop waiting for the perfect moment because you understand something deeper. The perfect moment doesn't exist. Only the next action does. And that action is always available. Right now. Not when you feel better. Not when things are easier. Now. That's the shift. From waiting to doing. From emotion to execution. From motivation to discipline. And once you make that shift, you become dangerous. Because now nothing controls your actions. Not your mood. Not your energy. Not your temporary lack of desire. You act because you decided to act. And that decision is stronger than any feeling. That's why disciplined people seem different. Not because they're more talented, not because they have more energy, but because they don't rely on how they feel. They rely on what they've decided. They wake up and do the work, even when they're tired, even when it's repetitive, even when it feels meaningless. Because they know something most people ignore. Feelings change, but actions accumulate, and accumulation is what creates results. So while others wait for motivation, they're already moving. While others hesitate, they're already building. While others stop, they continue. And over time, that difference becomes massive. Because every day you act, you move forward. Every day you don't, you stay the same. And those days add up, quietly, slowly, until one day the gap becomes obvious. And it looks like talent. It looks like luck. It looks like natural ability. But it's not. It's discipline, repeated long enough to create something real. So stop waiting to feel ready. Stop expecting motivation to carry you. Stop building your life on something unstable. Because motivation will fail you. It always does. But discipline? Discipline stays. Discipline works. Discipline moves you forward, whether you feel like it or not. And that's all that matters. Because the people who succeed don't act when they want to. They act when they need to. They show up when it's required. They move when it's necessary. They do the work regardless of how they feel. And that's the standard you need. Not perfection, not endless energy, just consistency. Just action. Just the decision to do what needs to be done every single day, no matter what. Because in the end, your life is not shaped by your motivation, it's shaped by your habits. And your habits are built by what you do. When you don't feel like doing anything at all, you're looking for the difference. The reason some people make it and others don't. You've probably told yourself it's talent, that they're just better, smarter, faster, more gifted. Or maybe you think it's luck. Right place, right time, right opportunity. Something you didn't have, something you missed. But if you're honest, that explanation never fully satisfies you. Because deep down, you've seen something that doesn't fit that story. You've seen people with less talent win. You've seen people with fewer advantages succeed. You've seen people who started behind move ahead. And it doesn't make sense unless you're looking at the wrong difference. Because the real difference is much simpler than you think and much harder to accept. It's not talent. It's not luck. It's not intelligence. It's one decision repeated over time. One person continues, the other stops. That's it. That's the line that separates outcomes, not in one moment, not in one big turning point, but across hundreds of small decisions, every day, quietly, unnoticed. One person keeps going, even when it's slow, even when it's frustrating, even when nothing seems to be happening. The other person doesn't. They pause, they hesitate, they question, and eventually they stop. Not because they couldn't continue, but because they chose not to. And that choice made all the difference. Because success is not something you reach quickly. It's something you stay with, something you endure, something you build long enough for it to become real. And most people don't fail because they can't build it. They fail because they don't stay long enough. They leave too early. They step away too soon. They stop before the process finishes. And when they look back, they call it failure. But it wasn't. It was distance left incomplete. It was effort cut short. It was potential abandoned halfway. And that's the truth most people avoid because it's uncomfortable. It removes excuses. It removes the idea that success is reserved for a few. It removes the belief that you need something special to make it. Because if the only difference is continuation, then the responsibility becomes yours. And that's hard to accept because now it's not about what you have. It's about what you do, not once, not occasionally, but consistently over time. And that's where most people fall apart. Not at the start, but in the middle, where things get repetitive, where progress feels invisible, where effort feels unrewarded. That's where decisions are made. That's where paths split. One person looks at the situation and thinks, this is too slow, this isn't working, this isn't worth it, and they stop. The other person feels the same things, the same doubt, the same frustration, the same uncertainty. But they don't stop, not because they feel better, not because they're more confident, but because they understand something different. They understand that stopping guarantees nothing. Continuing gives possibility, and they choose possibility again and again and again, until one day, that difference becomes visible. The results appear, the progress shows, the outcome becomes real. And from the outside, it looks like success, it looks like talent, it looks like luck. But it wasn't. It was continuation. It was the refusal to stop. And that's why the gap grows. Not instantly, but gradually. Every time one person keeps going while the other steps away. Every time one person repeats the work while the other takes a break that turns into quitting. Every time one person chooses discomfort while the other chooses relief. Those moments add up. They compound until one path leads somewhere and the other stays exactly where it started. And the hardest part? The person who stopped was never incapable. They had the ability, they had the opportunity, they had everything they needed, except one thing. They didn't stay long enough. They didn't persist through the phase that matters most. They didn't reach the point where effort turns into outcome. And that's why this truth matters, because it changes how you see yourself. You're not lacking talent. You're not missing some hidden advantage. You're not someone who can't succeed. You're someone who hasn't continued long enough yet. And that's something you can change, not overnight, not instantly, but with one decision to continue, even when it's slow, even when it's uncertain, even when it feels like nothing is happening, because that's where the difference is made. Not in big actions, but in sustained ones. Not in bursts of effort, but in consistency. Not in starting strong, but in finishing. And finishing is rare, because most people don't reach that point. They stop somewhere along the way. And once they stop, Their story stops with them. But yours doesn't have to. Because right now, you're still here, still moving, still capable of continuing. And that means something powerful. It means your outcome is not decided yet. It means your result is still being built. It means the only thing that separates you from where you want to be is time and persistence. Not talent, not luck. Just continuation. So don't look at others and think they're different. They're not. They just didn't stop. And if you can do the same, if you can hold on a little longer, if you can push through the moments that make others quit, you will arrive somewhere different. Because the path doesn't change, the rules don't change. The only thing that changes is whether you stay on it. And if you do, if you refuse to leave before it's done, you'll eventually reach the point most people never see. The point where everything makes sense, where effort becomes result, where persistence becomes success. And when that moment comes, you'll understand something clearly. You never lacked ability. You only lacked persistence. And once you chose to continue, everything changed. You've been telling yourself the wrong story, that you're not good enough, that you're behind, that somehow life just didn't work out for you. But after everything you've seen, everything you've felt, everything you've been through, you should understand this now. You are not incapable. You are not unlucky, and you were never meant to fail. What happened is simpler than that. You stopped. Too early, before the process had time to work, before the effort had time to grow, before the results had time to appear. And that changes everything. Because if the reason you're here is not a lack of ability, but a lack of continuation, then your story is not over. It was just interrupted. You walked away at the wrong moment, not at the beginning, not when it was impossible, but somewhere in the middle, where it felt too slow, too uncertain, too difficult to keep going, and you believed that feeling. You trusted it. You let it decide for you. But now you see it differently. Now you understand what was really happening. You weren't failing, you were building, quietly, slowly, without visible proof, and instead of continuing, you stepped away. That's it. That's the only thing that separated you from a different outcome. Not talent, not luck, not opportunity, just one decision to stop. And if one decision brought you here, then another decision can take you somewhere else. Because nothing about your ability has changed. Nothing about your potential is gone. Nothing about your future is fixed. It's still open, still waiting, still shaped by what you do next. Not tomorrow, not someday, now. Because the truth is, you don't need more time to think. You don't need a perfect plan. You don't need motivation. You need action. Simple, uncomfortable, consistent action. The kind you've avoided, the kind you've delayed, the kind you knew you should take, but didn't. And that's where everything begins again. Not with a big move, not with a dramatic change, but with something small. One more attempt, one more effort, one more step forward when it would be easier to stay still. Because that's how you rebuild momentum. That's how you restart the process. That's how you move from where you are to where you want to be. Not all at once, but piece by piece. Action by action, day by day. And it won't feel perfect. It won't feel exciting. It won't feel like a breakthrough. It will feel ordinary, like repeating something you've already done before, like trying again after you already stopped once. But this time is different, because this time you understand what's at stake. This time you know what happens if you stop again. And this time you don't let that happen. You don't wait for motivation. You don't wait for confidence. You don't wait for certainty. You move anyway. You act anyway. You continue anyway. Because now you know something most people never fully accept. The result is not missing. It's delayed. And the only way to reach it is to stay, to remain in the process long enough for it to finally appear. That's it. That's the entire game. Not speed, not perfection, just persistence, just the refusal to stop. And if you can do that, if you can hold on a little longer than before, if you can go one step further than the last time you quit, you create a different ending. Not instantly, not dramatically, but inevitably. Because every time you continue, you move forward. Every time you act, you build something. Every time you refuse to stop, you separate yourself from the version of you that stayed stuck. And eventually, those small differences become everything. They become progress. They become results. They become the life you once thought was out of reach. And when you get there, when things finally start to work, You'll look back at this moment, not as the point where you failed, but as the point where you decided to continue. So don't go back to the old story. Don't tell yourself you're not good enough. Don't tell yourself you're unlucky. Don't tell yourself it's too late, because none of that is true. The truth is simpler and much more powerful. You didn't lose, you just stopped too soon. And now, you have the chance to do something most people never do. Start again. Not from zero, but from experience, from awareness, from understanding. And this time, you don't leave. This time, you stay. You take one more step. You make one more effort. You give it one more day. Not because it's easy, not because you feel ready, but because you know what happens if you don't. And that's enough. That's all you need. One more step, one more day, one more attempt, again and again and again, until the result finally catches up. And when it does, you won't call it luck. You won't call it talent. You'll call it what it really is: the outcome of not stopping. So start now, do it again, push one more time, and this time, don't leave before it works.